In this section, we're going to be looking at the most common estimation technique, and in some ways, the easier technique, individual estimation. There are 4 lessons in this section, and we'll start by talking about what an individual estimate is by looking at individual expertise. We'll wind up the section with how we combine these individual estimates bottom up, noting the gotchas of combining estimates. Let's go ahead and start by looking at individual expertise. As I said, individual estimation by an expert is one of the most common techniques out there. Different surveys have come up with different kinds of numbers. 83% use informal analogies, just looking at it with your gut. 86% did a thing they called expert estimation with someone who was an expert. Another study saw that 72% of people utilize a method called expert opinion. These numbers strongly suggest that this is an approach that most of us are using in some way or another. But what does it really mean? What is an individual expert judgment all about? Basically, what an individual expert judgment is all about is using your memory as our calibration device. That is, we look at something and say to ourselves, okay, how big is it? And then we rely on our memory to help us go, oh, it's this big, or it's this much effort, or it takes that long to do it. Our memory is our calibration. That's what we mean when we say we're using expertise. We're using our memory. Now, unfortunately, memory calibration has some pitfalls. Here's some of the things that often happen when we rely on our memory. We tend to be optimistic. Small things tend to be forgotten. We forgot all the effort that was really needed. We remember just some of the effort. More counterintuitively, we tend to remember a work effort's estimate over the actual outcome. That is, if we go a few months past the end of the work effort, we are more likely to recall the work effort's estimate, a number we were thinking about quite a lot, more than the actual outcome that happened only once. There are, fortunately, some ways we can improve our expert judgment. Here's a sample of some of the things we'll be talking about: 3-point estimates, work patterns, checklists, and risk factors. We'll go into a bunch of these things going forward, but it's worth thinking about that when we're using our memory, we're going to have to find some way to make that actually a bit better because, unfortunately, our memory calibration is positively correlated with bad estimates. The first thing to clear up, though, is who's the expert? I kept putting those in air quotes. Whose memory are we going to use to calibrate with? And my answer is that the person who is closest to the work. What does that mean? Well, I think there's different levels of work. Here are a bunch of work levels. At the project level, I think a project manager type person is the person closest to the work. At the release level, again, a project manager or product owner might be the closest to that level of work. At an epic level or some chunk or a feature, it's going to be the product owner or a feature owner closest to the work. However, if the work is a technical infrastructure type of thing, then perhaps it's the set of developers who are going to be doing the work. But once we start getting smaller than an epic or a feature, then the expert is the people who are actually doing the work, the developers who are working in the story, for example. At the task level, the expert is going to be the individual doing the work, not the individual's boss, not the person who's done that kind of work 1,000 times, but isn't doing it this time. The person who is doing the work is the expert, even if this is the first time. Now, that first timer should talk to the person who's done it 1,000 times, but the first timer is the expert on their first time. One of the things I do to help people understand about how individual expertise works and some of the memory calibration issues around it is to have them estimate something simple. In the classroom, I asked them to estimate how long it would take them to multiply 2 4-digit numbers together by hand. Each person is the expert on how long it would take them. I also asked them what they think the range of the class will be, something they're not an expert on. I have them write that all down. After they've written down their estimates, I give them the 2 4-digit numbers to multiply by hand, and they solve it. Note, this is by hand, not by calculator, not by spreadsheet. This is like estimating a work task that you might have done recently, but it's in your skill set to do. I set the timer, and they write down their time upon completion. Go ahead and estimate for yourself how long it would take you to multiply two four-digit numbers by hand. Also, estimate what you think a range is for a group of people. If you're energetic, pause the video after I give you the numbers and time yourself doing the arithmetic. If you're like most people, you probably estimated that it'd take you about a minute to do the math and it ended up taking you closer to 2 minutes. That's a very common result. I've had some people who have taken as little as 45 seconds and they estimated larger. 45 seconds is about as fast as I've seen it done. I've also had to take people longer than 3 minutes, but most of them were within the 3 minute mark. So if you had a range, the actual range seems to be between 45 and up to about 3 minutes. The majority somewhere around 2 minutes. A few never finished before I stopped the lab. Most did the math correctly, but there's always a few who make a mistake and come up with the wrong number too. What people see is that when they look at the estimate they wrote down and look what it actually took them, they're not off by 2% or 5% or 10%. They're off by 50%, 75%, 150%. On a simple task, it only takes a couple minutes. No wonder our track record on getting an estimate right is very low. When we're asked about how long a work task takes, that might be a day or a few days worth of work. If we're off by that much on a 2 minute thing, how far off will we be off on days? How much real estimation error are we building in here? Our memories are poor calibrators. We may know generally what we need to do, but we forget lots of things, and the actual work turns out to be different. 4 notes from this lesson. First, individual expert judgment relies on expertise. You're trusting the memory of that individual to be the calibration. The better the calibration, the better the estimate. The person closest to the work is that person we're going to call the expert. I can't be the expert for an estimate if someone else is doing the work. They are the expert. And even in small, trivial estimates, we can be off by a large percentage because our memory calibration, our individual expertise, tends to be positively correlated with inaccurate estimates. Finally, our memories are not that good, but there are techniques we can use to make individual estimates much, much better. And that's what we'll be going on to next.